Hi, welcome back to another episode of Life Sci AI, the podcast series. This episode is going to be focused around BIOS Health, and we have the pleasure of being joined by CSO and co-founder Oliver Armitage of the company. I'll hand straight over to yourself because I know that you're keen to share a little bit about the company, and then we can go into a little bit more about yourself, your role, and sort of your journey into how to get to BIOS as well.
Great to meet you today, Nick, and thanks for inviting us to talk about BIOS and the sort of exciting new area of what can be done with the nervous system and bioelectronics.
Awesome. So as you said, it's nervous system, bioelectronics. It's forward thinking, and it's a really interesting application of AI that you guys have, and not one that's really has a major competitor, let's say, in the market at the moment. But just keen, before we delve into that piece and laying out sort of what is currently on the market, product-wise and medical device-wise, and what you're looking to move it forward to. Be keen to know the foundations of BIOS, though. Like, why did you start? How did it come about, and things like that?
Definitely. So, BIOS, we make AI-powered neural interfaces for reading and writing neural signals, and using that information to develop therapeutics and to deliver therapeutics. So when you read neural signals, you're reading natural biomarkers of the body communicating with the brain, communicating with organs in the body about what they should be doing and receiving sensory information. And so when you read that information and decode it into neural biomarkers, you get very sort of powerful new biomarkers of activity, and when you sort of stimulate, or when you change those signals or add new signals, you're delivering a therapeutic. You're changing the function of an organ to make it healthier. And so I sort of see, like, what we do with neural biomarkers. It's kind of like a live version of genomics. It's like a new type of data that's like stored, and in this case, flowing around the body. It's like the nervous system is like the body's internet, right? The genome is like the hard drive. The genome like sits there, and it's all written down, and you go reference information from it when you need it. The nervous system is like this live transmission of information in real time between the brain and the organs. And if you read that and you decode it in real time using this kind of like special form of AI that we work on, then you can use it for just a whole different branch of precision medicine.
Okay, and so where did like BIOS come from, though? Was it a conversation you've had like at a pub, or at a publication, like a research meeting, or?
My co-founder and I, we're both in the University of Cambridge here as academics. I've been sort of how you connected biology to engineering materials, like how you just connect these things together and make them happy and live together in the long term. Working in the area, and he was in sort of computational neuroscience and AI, right. And so like we had always I've always been driven towards making like neural interfaces a technology that exists in the world. They're a powerful technology. In the brain, they look like brain-computer interfaces, and in the sort of peripheral nervous system, they look like using genomics for precision medicine. And so they're just a really powerful technology that has sort of existed in a scientific concept, and is obviously exists in science fiction, but is a really, really powerful thing to use in the real world now. And so I'd kind of always been driven towards wanting to bring that to reality. And that means that, so we started BIOS in 2015 in order to bring like real-time neural interfaces into kind of like real world use, right? Like actually take them out of being this kind of like science project that gets done in like 10 patients funded by an American military grant, through to something that is used to treat, hundreds of thousands, millions of real people who have, all these diseases that can benefit from this technology. And so, that was the kind of the ethos behind BIOS when we started the company in 2015. And now we're sort of seeing various sectors pick up on this direction as like an important an important new technology direction, an important new just treatment modality in medicine.
I see. And so, did you always want to be a co-founder, or think like I need to, or was it a case of, for me to achieve what I want to achieve, the vehicle is a company?
I always wanted to make technology that was like that impacted the real world, that like actually like that came out of an academic lab and was large and scalable, and you know, the vehicle to do that is a company. So yeah, I always wanted to get this technology out into the world, and you know, it only lives in the world on its own. It only becomes a thing that multiple people and, you know, tens of hundreds and thousands of people use if it becomes a commercially commercially valuable, commercially scalable business. That's what gives it sustaining. Otherwise it's reliant on those, you know, American military grants. So I always knew I wanted to make a company where this stuff became widely used in medicine. I used to think that I would be an academic for 30 years until the technology and then once it worked, then you would like spin it out to become a company. But just like market trends that were happening in 2015, 2016 meant that, you know, my co-founder and I realized that actually now was really the right time to be at the forefront of this wave. And I think we've seen that with the proliferation of neurotechnology companies in the last 2 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting you picked up on those trends, I guess, before the recent more acceleration of trends. But I guess, why did you picked up there, you wanted to put this application onto a medical field and a medical area? Why is that?
There's so much need. Like, I mean, if we just take heart disease, like cardiovascular diseases don't receive really any new drugs. Like the major drugs that are the first line therapy drugs that are used to treat cardiovascular disease were discovered in the 60s, right? ACE inhibitors, blockers, these were all 60s, 70s molecules, and they're still the first line of molecules that you get in response to worsening heart failure and cardiac disease is 30% of deaths. So the fact that there is a huge amount of need in medicine for these kinds of technologies. And so when you think about a neural interface needing to exist in the world, if I have the choice between working on making it implant in a brain so that I can control my phone better versus putting it in a nerve such that someone can have an extra 20 years of life with heart failure, to me, that choice seems like there isn't a choice there, right? It's really obvious where you put this technology first. And that doesn't mean it won't be put in the brain for, you know, all of the amazing BCI applications afterwards, but you still treat people first, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, okay, cool. So just in terms of, you mentioned there the cardiovascular piece, and I know that's an area in which you guys focus on at BIOS, but and the first line, you know, the beta blockers, 1960s, that kind of stuff. So paint the picture for us pre-BIOS of what the landscape for treating these diseases that you're looking to change the treatment for, what it was before you guys came through.
So right now, so the first point, the thing to point out is that the heart is directly, like all your organs, is directly controlled by your nervous system, right? You have this kind of like web of nerves coming down from your neck and your spine, wrapping all the way around the heart, that are really sort of like controlling the different phases of heart function and how hard to beat. And this kind of like basic just physiology of how the neurocardiovascular system functions is what beta blockers target, right? If you just take that word apart, beta blocker, the beta is the beta receptor. It's a neural receptor from the nerve onto the cardiac muscle cell. And the blocker is because it's trying to block a signal hitting the beta receptor, right? So a beta blocker is blocking a neural signal from hitting the heart. So it's always been known that this was a really positive or a really powerful way of treating cardiovascular disease. That's what a beta blocker is. It blocks the bit of your nervous system that is telling your heart to beat harder and faster, which is what causes it to basically break down over time because it's working in overdrive. And if you intervene on the nervous system higher up, then you can start to just change those signals at their root and get a more kind of like a more nuanced, more precision management of cardiac function. So sort of to answer your question, cardiovascular treatment right now, there are sort of 4 or 5 first-line drugs that will get used for someone who has worsening heart failure. Beta blockers and ACE inhibitors are 2 of the first. These will get used to sort of lower your cardiac function and try and dilate your blood vessels. This and then that patient is sort of managed primarily through like very arm's length observations, like how fast do they walk for how far do they walk in 6 minutes is sort of a measure of how well their heart function is doing, and they'll be recommended alongside their drugs. They'll be recommended to exercise and eat better and try and like bring down their overall like how much work it takes to just move them around in the world in order to allow their heart muscle to not work as hard, right? And that's how you manage someone with cardiovascular disease. And then you have all the variety of ways in which like something's really gone wrong. Like you've had a full heart attack and part of the heart is dead. You've had a cardiovascular aortic rupture. There's all these like sort of small like injuries that then happen after you've had this worsening of heart function. And for those, you have treatments like pacemakers, you have treatments like stents, you have treatments like full valve replacements if it's really bad, like full ventricle replacements like a ventricular pump. Like those are end of life extension devices. So yeah, the management of cardiovascular function now is basically give some molecules to try and like make the heart's work easier and make it work less hard, and then try and get the person through like just behavioral change to be healthier. What we're doing and what we're part of is a sort of a revolution of using the nervous system to directly change what the heart is doing. So by the therapeutic implants we're developing for cardiovascular disease via a sort of very like minimally invasive procedure where a device is like a pacemaker, where a device is like slipped in under under the skin. A pacemaker can be done in half an hour to 45 minutes in an outpatient clinic. The device is like slipped in under the skin. You then put some electrical signals directly onto the nerves, which can control what the heart is doing in real time, and that device is delivering its medicine, it's delivering its therapeutic as the form of an electrical signal to the nerve. And in doing so, it's defined in software. And that means that, on day 1, when you have your first cardiovascular problems, then the device is really just doing something quite light touch to keep things in a good space. And if things get worse, the doctor can change the algorithm, update, like tell you like, oh, you need a slightly better version of this software or a slightly more intense version of the medicine, and that can get updated like changing an app on your phone. So by bringing the management of cardiac function into the realm of software, you allow it to leverage all of that kind of like quick update via a new form of medicine where you come in, the doctor says, oh, you need slightly more, and they turn it up, and then everything, and then you go home, and that's managed.
Awesome. So it's like, I know every time you get like an iOS update or something, it just updates you through.
Exactly, and that's where you start then thinking about other diseases. So the nerves that you go and put that device on in order to control cardiac function, those nerves, you've got these you have these big like compound trunk nerves that have they branch out to loads of different places, the vagus nerve and some of the nerve locations in the upper spinal cord. When you go to those places, you're actually interacting with signals controlling lots of different organs. So you start out with an algorithm that's like trying to change your cardiac function, but that algorithm can be updated to also bring in control of inflammation or control of blood pressure or control of sort of something like a wheezing or a respiratory response, and specifically bronchoconstriction, like an asthmatic response. And so because you're interacting with because that device, which first gets given for cardiovascular disease, is interacting with signals that are mixed up with all these other signals controlling all these other organs, and you're selectively trying to change the cardiac ones so that you can treat cardiac disease, but you change the software and you decide you also now need to help with high blood pressure, or you need to help with an inflammatory disorder, and that means that these kind of a device like this can be like a real platform for a bunch of different therapies, because it uses the fact that biology has this very centralized structure. So if you interact with it where it's centralized, you get to change lots of things at the same time, as long as you really understand what's going on with like that's where AI and neural biology.
So where does this sit in the body? So it's centralized, right? So where would this device sit in someone?
So like in the neck, is where the main nerves are, which is like, so the main place a pacemaker gets put is here under the clavicle. That's where the metal sort of capsule goes. But really what you're trying to get to is a couple of nerves which are just under the skin in the neck, and are being used for and are sort of flowing down to the body. In fact, the Star Trek like Vulcan death grip about putting someone to sleep is based on the fact that you're pushing on someone's vagus nerve to make them fall asleep quickly. I see.
So it's the nerves, like the major pathways for the body you put it in. It's almost so this device sits kind of like a filter between the signals, and then it kind of can be long term, like akin to an Android platform, or an iOS platform, where the doctor's implementing different software algorithms like an app, and then that sits at that person's personalized medical care.
Yeah, exactly. And right now some of those devices look like pacemakers, where they're sort of a capsule and a wire, but there are other versions of them that are, getting quite close to clinical use. Other versions of that hardware, which are much smaller things that could even go in through a needle and just sort of sit right there alongside the nerve, just be like a little like something about the size of a pill that kind of goes along in and sits next to the nerve and applies some electrical signals to it. And what that means is that you have this they're reasonably minimally invasive now, and they're getting even smaller and even less invasive. And once you have that piece of hardware, as you said, it's like having like an Android platform, and that means that the patient experiences getting their new therapy like getting a new app, like getting a new piece of software, right?
Yeah, so that's super cool.
Yeah, when you take it out of the realm of electronics and into the realm of software, you get to leverage this whole ecosystem of software updates and changes and this like nice patient UI that the tech industry has pioneered.
Yeah, for sure. And so the tech behind it then, and that's what's actually sitting in it. Like it must be, like you say, it's a very small piece of kit. So what do the algorithms sit on? Is it the hardware inside it? Is it using the cloud? Like, give it a bit of as best as you can without giving out your secrets.
Yeah, and the answer is they sit at every level, right? So like you have a piece of metal that is recording the electrical signal of the nerve, and so you're recording this like neural data as it flows past at like 30,000 times per second. It's like having like a super high res camera on the nerve from an electrical perspective. And then when you want to change a signal, it applies a bit of current to the nerve to either block a natural signal that you don't want to happen, or to add a new signal in. And so that's kind of what it looks like at its like the most like detailed contact level.
Yeah.
Some of your signal you're processing like really live in real time, like on like very optimized hardware, like right on the device. And some of it's being transmitted like to the phone or via the phone up to the cloud and being retrained overnight and changing back to you. So there's algorithms running at like all three levels, right? There's the super close to the device, there's the medium size, and then there's like the cloud.
Okay, cool. And then long term then, will GPs need to learn how to use this then and deliver it? Like, is that going to be GP care long term, or doctor's care, or?
Well, I mean, I think new technologies that require significant amounts of training with clinical populations are, very rarely successful. And the reason, because the job of the manufacturer is to make something very, very easy for the doctor, right? Right now, if you have, for instance, a pacemaker, the doctor has there's like a sort of a wireless device that you sort of pop on your chest, and it connects to it, and then the doctor through a sort of a screen can like change the settings of it. That's a reasonably clunky way of doing the kind of thing we're talking about, which really can just be done as Wi-Fi over the air. So in terms of like how does someone learn how to use it, it's really just like interacting with an app, right? They're saying they see some information about right now the BIOS device is detecting that you have a neural signal to do with like worsening heart failure, and then like what kind of electrical medicine do you want to apply to halt that? And the doctor will, at that point, that's where the doctor sort of has input and choice, and they pick something, and they pick like a dosage, right? They pick a prescription, and they pick a prescription as part of their training, and then you go home with that, and then they can sort of change that prescription. So as long as like we as the manufacturer provide that to the doctor in this kind of like ecosystem that they already work in, right? Like here is a type of medicine that you prescribe in an amount. Here's the recommended dosage for an average patient of X body weight, and then here's the ranges. Like that's what they do now, and that's what they're good at understanding. They learn all the time. Doctors learn how to dose new medicines. I think take it into an entirely different realm where they have to start like setting electrical parameters, then you have issues, and that's what unfortunately what some of the current pacemaker modifications look like is they expose the doctor to a piece of technology understanding they don't really need to look at. What they need to look at is dosage and disease.
Oh, I see. So you would see that the dosage would just be linked to the algorithm and the software for that particular patient. Okay. And on the device itself, then, how much is it geared towards like the therapy of the person and treating the disease, and how geared is it to actually learning about the disease and the research side of things?
So sort of intrinsically, the device or the systems naturally do both, right? So like the same piece of metal that is recording the nerve at 30,000 times a second is the same piece of metal that applies the small amount of current to change something. So you're just intrinsically doing both at the same time. Right now, what we are doing as a company is we are using it more in its research setting in order to like discover new neural patterns that are related to different disease types, and in doing so, like discover where there are opportunities to apply electrical medicine or opportunities to apply molecular medicine, to be honest, like basically using that neural data to drive discovery of new therapeutic areas while also developing like our core therapeutic area, which is cardiovascular disease. So right now we're primarily using it for research in lots of diseases and therapy development in one disease.
I see. And what sort of major partnerships do you have on the research side of things you might want to share?
So like we have a sort of major contract with the National Institute of Health in the US, and they have a sort of consortium of researchers working on peripheral nerve therapies in lots of disease areas, and we're partnered with them delivering like tools to like better target the types of waveforms that some of those researchers who are experts in different diseases and their relationship to the nervous system use. So we're doing that right now from a tools perspective. We have a couple of other partnerships that I can't really talk about yet in specific disease areas with more sort of pharmaceutical and device type companies. But
awesome, cool. And when you're doing the research part and you're developing the algorithms for the cardiovascular piece as well, what are the major, challenges or restrictions that you find that you may have thought, actually, I didn't think this would be a challenge or a problem, or I didn't realize we'd have to consider this restriction or this implementation for it?
I think one of the main things that we sort of go through is just sort of how much of the technology we really want to when we talked earlier about like putting algorithms at like different levels of processing, there's a lot of technology development and just like engineering time in making something like super lightweight and efficient. And then so the sort of instinct is to want to run like absolutely every model you've come up with live in real time, and then trying to which of the new research models are going to get run like in the cloud like at nighttime, or like, and which ones you're actually going to prioritize putting like, you know, embedding down onto a device, because there's I think in a sort of in that discovery setting, when we're using it as like a platform for, when we're using our kit, our sort of hardware and our software stack as a platform for like research discovery, there's a temptation to do everything in real time. There's a temptation to like see if I can control, you know, a breathing symptom in real time at the same time as an inflammatory signal. I didn't really need to do that. So like just constrained engineering time about how we prioritize the things that we have to do now, because there's so much, just so many interesting aspects of like different signals about different kinds of disease that are all novel, and there are whole novel sections that we have to just like put down and not look at, because there's like a finite amount of time, and focus on the ones to do with like cardiovascular disease and the ones that drive our like partnerships. And like I had a conversation with someone this morning asking about, you know, vomiting and emesis, like, you know, nausea or vomiting. And I said, you know, we haven't looked at any of that data yet. It's not one of our like core priorities yet, but there's just a huge wealth of it that I could go down. So restricting yourself from doing that is a challenge.
So which rabbit hole do you go down? Like, it's crazy, but I guess that's also just like the immense opportunity of this technology. Like you are creating the platform, you're creating the environment, the landscape for this to go at, and then you're proving that it can be done in the cardiovascular therapy area, whilst also researching in different areas. I guess if you look at that, like it's just something that I've just thought about whilst we've been chatting, the area of security on this as well. This getting in the hands of the wrong person and somebody else, you know, getting it, controlling the device, it could be a tricky situation. So how is that considered?
Yeah, I mean, so we sort of have we have an advantage in that we're not trying to adopt in like a legacy system, right? Like when you try and take some electronics that were made in the 90s, like so existing neuromodulation devices, you know, there's like the famous example that Dick Cheney had the Bluetooth in his pacemaker turned off because he didn't want anyone to hack it, right? So if you take old pacemakers from the 90s, that underlying electrical engineering, and try and use it for like a new application and give it, you know, modern Bluetooth, like security was never baked into that system at the start, because they weren't really thinking about cybersecurity, and they definitely weren't thinking about cybersecurity in terms of, I mean, GDPR didn't exist, obviously. The concept of like people owning their personal data didn't exist. And so using one of those, like trying to take an old legacy system and use it for a new application, you run into loads of those problems. If you start now and consider it from the start, there are really, really good ways of baking in incredibly good like device security, right? Like, you know, the kind of technology that's in your passport, where you have a hardware chip inside the passport that has like a hard code on it, and you have to be able to comms with exactly that chip, and that never changes, right? Like those kinds of like modern hardware security are available when you're starting from, well, this is what this technology should be. This is what we should do with this as a system. I'm going to take the long-term vision of this type of technology and where it can go, rather than trying to adopt a legacy system. Means that you can really bake that stuff in from like the lowest level of design at the start, and when you do that, like the sort of modern IoT security of edge chips, then it is incredibly good.
Do you think long term though, if you look at like in 15 years time, as I don't know, attacks change on how they're on tech, do you think that could be like a long term, I don't know, like threat, the right word to say about this technology? Like if you have to then go rebuild it again or stuff like that, how have you considered that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but like the people that do this now are obviously they're always considering the way attack, like they call them attack surfaces, will evolve in the future, right? Like, how is there a new way of interacting with that? And really, what tends to be the answer is people go like, well, they call it like air gap, right? It's like when you like cold store crypto, you go put it on a device and the device is just not internet connected, right? And it's like, it doesn't matter that you just solve that problem at a really basic level by just not letting it talk to, just separate.
Yeah.
You create a physical barrier where there isn't a connection to a remote device. And so the people that are designing these, like, when you go buy a new electronics chip and you say, like, what level of like security do I want built into it? You say, I want like the highest tier. The people that have designed that with some like mind to what are going to be the future attack surfaces. And often the results of those look like doing things where you create these like fundamental hardware pairing keys that have to happen. And those people are considering what happens when quantum computing can search a trillion different hash key pairs instantly and all that kind of. They are experts in that area and are considering those kind of problems into the chips that are designed now, because this is a problem this is something that needs to be solved and is being solved in every industry, not just not just medical. So like the real state of the art stuff now, the people that are experts in it will tell you it considers those things. And really the best I can go on at the moment. But
no, it's interesting because it's something I just thought of during this conversation about, like, that could be quite tricky, a tricky situation. But then again, if you look at the chips that are being used for like autonomous driving or autopilot, it's the same situation, same challenges that they all face. They're all actually life or death situations. So and as someone who's a very anxious flyer, I would rather know that my plane's not going to get hacked.
There are lots of safety critical industries, medical being one of them, and those kinds of like what are the future problems are considered in those state-of-the-art chips. And if those things run into problems, then all passports are going to run into problems and people will come up with new versions of things. But
But just on that, then, it's interesting that you said that obviously you built it all from scratch all the way up. So I guess being the CSO and a co-founder, coming out of academia, building a product on the ground up that's gone into clinical trials now, I think, as well. So what were the major challenges and what are the major successes that you found, and what have you maybe learned as well? So there's 3 questions there. Sorry for bombarding you on that piece.
Our remote systems are in clinical usage. Our implanted systems are not yet in clinical usage. They will be reasonably soon. But I'm incredibly lucky in that I get to work with a group of people who are all more excellent at what they do than I could ever have been. That's why we hired them. And for me, that's just people who are extreme experts in machine learning or in embedded medical software or in drug development or whatever the area is, are sort of have coalesced around what we're doing at BIOS and have joined to work on this like very interesting problem and this sort of fundamentally new technology area. And I care about it innately, which is why I started the company. And so I'm incredibly lucky that I get the reward of seeing all these really fantastic people work really hard on a problem that I care a lot about, which is the thing I find the most amazing. But when you sort of say, what have you learned? Like, something was just to go hire those people that are experts and give them their area, right? Like, I'm not an expert on medical. I wasn't an expert on medical regulation. I've had to learn a huge amount about it. I wasn't an expert on machine learning specifically. My co-founder was, but when you take a really motivating problem and you can hire really expert, like truly professor level expert people in those areas, and then like put them in a room together and give them a whiteboard or 27, then like that's when magic happens, and you end up just facilitating and enabling that. And so I think I've learned that, and then on the other side, the sort of the outward facing side, I've learned the extent to which this kind of technology I always thought this would be obviously useful in, like the really obvious areas like amputation and cardiovascular disease, but movement disorders are the obvious thing to do with the nervous system. But I've sort of learned, I've had very experienced career scientists in big pharmaceutical companies be like, oh wow, I can, like, this solves a problem I've been having with my development of my molecule for diabetes, or development of my molecule for bladder control, and I've learned through those people and the way they've seen the technology we're developing, application areas that I never saw, and that has been that to me has been like just seeing people who have just come from somewhere entirely else, and as like a not even joining by us, but like just a sort of external partner through conversations with them, being like, hey, this is the kind of thing we do. They're like, oh, I want to use that for this. I'm like, oh, I never thought of wound healing, but go look at wound healing. Wound healing, cancer, everything.
Yeah. So would you say that was the biggest surprise as well during this journey, the different amazing application areas you could look into?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of always worth doing, even if it was just cardiovascular disease, right? Yeah. Because it's 30% of deaths. That was always like a great reason to do it anyway. But the extent of its breadth and the extent of just the physiological reach of the nervous system, and hence its implication on so many different disorders, is it's just astonishing.
Yeah. And could you attach this to mental health as well?
Yeah, and there's already an approved, the vagus nerve I mentioned earlier, there's already an approved vagus nerve stimulator for depression. And it's been used sort of off-label for chronic migraine and anxiety. We're working with a partner in anxiety at the moment in that area. So those kinds of neurological conditions where, I mean, for instance, in migraine, what you see just before migraine, you see this effect called cortical spreading depression. That's not depression in the sort of mental health context. Depression in like the literal use of that word. But what you see is like across the cortex, you see electrical activity go down, right? And when people apply electrical signals to parts of that cortex, they're starting to show in some clinical trials. Some of these are non-invasive, some of these are invasive devices, that you can see that as it starts to happen, change it, and prevent a migraine. And so in lots of huge numbers of neurological and mental health conditions, some of these technologies end up being very powerful. As I said, it's already an approved and prescribed device in depression.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So just before we finish, what does like the next 12 months, next 3 years, next 5 years, probably can't think of next 5 years, but for Bios, because it could be crazy, right? It could go in different directions. But what does the immediate and the short, the medium term future look like?
Yeah, so the immediate term is to turn our cardiovascular therapeutics into clinical trials. Like we're sort of doing that transition at the moment of embodying the version that will be used as that first clinical version, like for those first users of our sort of AI stimulation therapeutic technology. That's going to be super exciting. It'll be the first time that anyone's put an AI algorithm around the way a stimulation is applied in a clinical setting. So yeah, super excited about that. Like to turn our own therapeutics into a clinical program from a preclinical program, and start really bringing in. We've got a couple of projects that are soon to start. Maybe not in the next. We won't be pushing out results in the next 12 months, but in the sort of next 18 to 24 months, we'll start being able to, I think, publish really high quality results of usage of this technology area, like machine learning decoded neural biomarkers in other diseases with big pharma and device partners that are investing their own hundreds of millions of dollars in therapeutics in a specific area that will use technology, and will have really, really cool results. I think we've got some really cool projects in plan. Hopefully, all science works out. There's always science to do, but hopefully the science works out, and we get some really interesting results in those other disease areas that, yeah,
we'll see. Yeah, no. So fingers crossed for the next 18, 24 months. It'd be exciting to see as they come through. It's an absolute pleasure.
It's a big time for neurotechnology generally. We're seeing mega funding rounds from everyone from Neuralink to Paradromics and various other companies that are doing getting big funding rounds in this space. There's really exciting clinical trials happening in inflammation and hypertension and in some other and a couple of other diseases. And I think by us bringing the machine learning and AI aspect of that to both new diseases and some of the existing big elephants of is going to be a really exciting time for BIOS, and partly because it's going to be a really exciting time for neurotechnology, showing what it can do in the world.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right, and we have conversations more within neurotechnology than we have done before. There's some great companies in Spain, some great companies in the Benelux region that are doing some super cool stuff. So yeah, not only BIOS, but it'd be super cool to see what else happens in that space. But I absolutely love speaking to you. It's been an absolute pleasure. If anyone wants to follow up, anyone's got any questions or anything they want to discuss with you, what's the best way to reach out to Oliver?
You can reach out to BIOS through our website. There's a contact us form. Or sort of generally just email info@bios.health. There's this is a technology area. Someone said to me the other day, someone we hired, he said, I really want to join because it's a technology area that's never going away. So like it's the new technology that's coming into the world right now, and this is the time when it's coming in, and it's never going anywhere. It's never going to go away. There's never going to be a time where we're not going to do neural interfaces of some description. So so that makes it an exciting time to go work in it, right? It's genomics of 20 years ago.
Yeah. Awesome. But no, pleasure. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Great to meet you today, Nick. Thanks.